My name is Tina Henry, and I'm a Literacy Collaborative primary trainer. And today I'm going to be talking about my chapter in Guiding K-3 Writers to Independence, the New Essentials. My chapter is called Story Structure as a Support to Meaning Making. In part one, we talked about aspects of narrative, and I had many examples to show you how we help children to understand narrative and how it can provide a support for teachers as they plan lessons in the classroom. In part two, I'm going to be talking about Leslie, a classroom teacher who is planning some lessons based on her book, Old Henry. She reads the book in interactive read aloud and has discussions with the children to help them understand and to make meaning. But in writing workshop, she uses Old Henry as a mentor text. Leslie has been planning some of her lessons and some of the things that she will actually talk to the children about. She uses some open-ended questions to start discussions, and she thinks of places in Old Henry that will actually provide opportunities for the rich discussion and conversations with the children. One of the things that she knows about how texts work is that there is a conflict between the characters and conflict within characters. And so she's going to take advantage of that in the discussion with the children. In this transcript of the lesson, you can see that she stops at a particular point in the story. And she says to the children, "What do the neighbors want?" James says, "They want Henry to fix things up a bit around his house." But Henry didn't think of it. Leslie says, "There seems to be a conflict in the story. How do you think Henry feels?" Hannah replies, "He thinks the house is interesting. He has a place for everything, like one man's trash is another man's treasure." Philip says he didn't think to clean it up. This provided an opportunity for the children to dwell on what was happening between the characters and within them. At another point in the story, Leslie stops, and she wants the children to really think about how the characters are going to interact next. The committee members have gone over to the mayor, and they say to him that they would like to actually approach Henry again this time. But the mayor suggests that they be nice to him. The book says, "On a day in November, they sought the advice of the mayor, who suggested being nice." Being nice? Please try it twice. So she reads this to the children and then stops. And at this point in the discussion, she invites a couple of the children to come up and do an impromptu role play. The reason that she does that is that the children will be able to take their perceptions of the story and to make a prediction about what will happen next. They have an opportunity for some drama. Maya comes up and she role plays. "Hi, Henry. I was just wondering if you could fix up your house. Your house would match up the neighborhood. It would look nice. It would look like the rest of the neighborhood." Hannah, her classmate, replies, "Sure, I'll fix up my house to make you guys happy, and thanks for saying it nicely." After the role play is over, Leslie has a conversation. "Thank you, Hannah. Why did you react like that to the neighbor?" Hannah replies, "Because Henry is easygoing. He doesn't really care about things and would probably say yes to the neighbor because she was nice." Philip says, "He has not cleaned it up yet. I don't think he will do it." Leslie says, "Well, let's read more of the story and find out what happens." This little opportunity of role-playing has provided the children with a time to think and analyze the character in the situation. And that's what readers do. They really need to be thinking not only about the literal aspects of a text, but to go beyond it, to connect to the characters, but also to think about what will happen next and to relate it to their own lives. When we think about helping children in interactive read aloud, we have some goals as teachers. Readers take action to monitor understanding. We want to help children to think about what the author has said, to think about what we think is happening next, and to really check back in the text to make sure that we are really thinking along the lines and using evidence from the story. Another goal for learners is to connect to previous knowledge and to infer new meanings. And so teachers need to think about places in the text to stop, to have children make those connections about things that they have experienced themselves and what they know about the world. Another conclusion that teachers need to come to is to analyze plot, character, and theme, not only for themselves, but to really facilitate children to do that. And then to complete the circle, to make a deeper connection to their lives. So that teachers need to be skillful, not only as storytellers, but also as facilitators of conversations around texts. Another thing Leslie's going to be doing is to helping children write personal narratives. We can learn a lot about writing through the writing of personal narratives. So just as in reading, the teacher supports the students to take on meaning making in writing. So in planning for this writing mini lesson, she's going to reread Old Henry to herself. But now she's going to be thinking about how the students are as writers, and she thinks about places in the text that would be possible places where she can emphasize so that she can teach them some craft techniques of the writer, and how she can use this in her writing mini lessons. Her writing workshop consists of a mini lesson, time for independent writing, and conferences with children as individuals, and then a time for sharing. A big part of the mini lesson, as they are beginning to write personal narratives, is oral storytelling. If you think about an oral storytelling, it really is thinking about some incident in your life, a vivid memory, and sharing it with another person in a story form. But Leslie wants to go and use oral storytelling, but also use Old Henry as a mentor text. She thinks to herself, how does the writer help us to understand the character and what he wants? How is dialogue used to draw the reader into the story? And how does the author show rather than tell? So now she's thinking about the text. And if you look at the continuum for literacy learning, you'll notice that there are goals for students to know about text also. Thinking about the text is an important goal. Bill Rohrbeck says, if you don't have a fiction background, then you owe it to yourself to study the techniques of fiction, especially about character. And so that's what she's going to be doing with her students. In planning her lesson, Leslie has decided to use this particular scene in her mini lesson. At last they decided to form a committee and went to him saying, "We are proud of our city. If you'd only help out, think how good it would look." "Excuse me." He bowed and went back to his book. What she wanted to do is to show the children how the author has shown rather than told. And she gets the children to think about what it means when the character, Henry, actually stops talking to the neighbors and returns to his book with only an "excuse me." She then talks to the children about how they can use this technique in their writing. In another lesson, Leslie has chosen this scene where the neighbors are offering a pie. They're still trying to be nice to Old Henry. In Old Henry, Leslie says, the author helped us understand the conflict between Henry and the townspeople. We wanted to know what would happen next. One way she did that was to include some conversation or dialogue between the characters. Listen to this part of the story again for the use of dialogue. So then again, Leslie would read this. Then she links it to the children's oral storytelling. She invites one of the students to come up and to think about what her story is all about, and to add some dialogue and conversation from the real story from her own life. And so in this way, she is highlighting the students' conversations that they have already lived. In some cases, Leslie will actually write some of this dialogue that the children are saying right on the chart so that they can see how it would look on paper. Another possibility for a mini lesson would be this particular scene. They picked his apples in the fall, they picked his apples now and then. Someone would ask, remember when, remember when, remember when? They start talking about this and what it actually means. James says, remember when he lived here, and look at it now. Leslie says, what might they be feeling as they remember Henry? And Hannah says maybe they miss him. They might come back again. Leslie is emphasizing the fact that when characters are talking, they often show their feelings. And so one of the things she wants them to add to their personal narratives is some of the feelings that they have had in some of their experiences, and how important it is, because that helps the reader, the people that are actually listening and reading their stories, relate to them as characters, and to really experience the things that they experienced. Lastly, another place that Leslie could emphasize in another MIDI lesson might be even the turning point. Maybe some other time we'd get along, not thinking that somebody has to be wrong, and we don't have to make such a terrible fuss, because everyone isn't exactly like us. And so Leslie says to the children, how have the townspeople's feelings changed? And Maya says, they didn't like him at the beginning because he didn't clean his yard, but now they think they miss him. Maybe he could come back and clean up his yard and keep the inside of his house as messy as he wanted to. Leslie says, maybe that would be a compromise with the neighbors. So in this way, she is emphasizing the turning point, thinking about there has to be a change. There's some sort of an epiphany where the character really realizes something and is forevermore changed. This is something that they can do in their own personal narratives, and this becomes a lesson in a craft technique that authors use in every story. So in conclusion, I think what we've been talking about is some of the ways that we can help students become meaning makers. What we're striving for is to help students think about themselves as meaning makers as they read and write. We support their attempts to self-monitor for meaning in both reading and in writing. We need to explain and demonstrate strategic actions that will help students clarify and focus their writing and deepen their understanding of the text they read. We use mentor texts to help students notice how other writers make meaning. Both Part 1 and Part 2 have really emphasized that conversations with students about narratives will support their ability to understand and construct written text and make sense of their own lives. Please join us for future webinars that talk about literacy for children.